Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Today we are going to talk about foundations of control. Control is the management function that involves monitoring activities to ensure that the goals are being accomplished as planned and correcting any significant deviations. The learning outcomes are explain the nature and importance of control. We will describe the 3 steps in the control process and discuss the types of control organizations and managers use and discuss contemporary issues in control. Explain the nature and importance of control. Here, this is a figure or a picture showing media and public information manager who is talking to employees working in the media monitoring room at Emergency Operations Center. Social media such as Facebook and Twitter helps the center track and monitor information during storm emergencies to get help to people in need. The importance of control. Control is important because it is the only way that managers know whether organizational goals are being met, and if they are not being met, the reason why. The value of the control function can be seen in 3 specific areas: planning, empowering employees, and protecting the workplace. I repeat, in 3 specific areas, the value or the importance of control can be seen in planning, empowering employees, and protecting the workplace. Controlling provides a critical link to planning. As we see here in this exhibit, if managers didn't control, they would have no way of knowing whether their goals and plans are being achieved and what future actions to take. Please note that standards are actually in planning stage. So the 3 steps involved are measurements, comparison with the standards, and taking corrective action if needed. So this is a critical link, and with this, the managers control and see if the objectives are met or not. And perhaps if the objectives are not met, they might have to revise their standards or goals. The second reason controlling is important because it can empower employees. Many managers are reluctant to empower their employees because they fear that something will go wrong and they will be held accountable. However, an effective control system provides information and feedback on employee performance and minimizes the chances of problems. Thus, control helps in decentralization. And the final reason that managers control is to protect the organization and its assets. Organizations face threats from scandals, thefts, workplace violence, security breaches, etc. Comprehensive controls and backup plans help minimize such work disruptions. Describe the 3 steps in the control process. Here in this exhibit, we can see that there are goals and standards which are in the planning stage done, and then the 3 steps involved are measuring the actual performance, comparing it with the standards, and taking corrective action if they are needed. So here, for example, the measurement of actual performance is going on, and then the comparison is made. If the standard is attained, you don't have to do anything. Then if it is not attained, then is variance acceptable? The variance is that how much there is tolerance in the standard that we can we suppose that the standard is achieved. So if the variance is acceptable, again do nothing. If the variance is not acceptable, then one has to ask, is standard acceptable? If yes, then identify cause of variation and correct performance. If the standard is not acceptable, then of course we have to go to the planning stage and revise the standards. Now, we mentioned that the control starts with measuring the performance, and there are several sources of information from where we can get we can measure the performance. It is by personal observation, statistical reports, oral reports, and written reports. Personal observation provides first-hand intimate knowledge of actual activity. Management by walking around describes when a manager is out in the work area and interacting directly with the employees, exchanging information about what's going on. Personal observation, however, is subjective and time-consuming effort. Some employees may consider as if their privacy is intruded. Statistical reports are not limited to computer outputs. They can include graphs, bar charts, and numerical displays that managers can use for assessing performance. Statistical reports often focus on only a few key areas. Oral reports. Information can also be acquired through oral reports, which can be gleaned through meetings, one-to-one conversation, or telephone calls. It is fast and allows for feedback and permits expression, tone of voice, and words themselves to convey meaning. It can also be recorded. Written reports. Actual performance may also be measured by written reports, which require more preparation time and formality than other measurements of performance. This often makes them more comprehensive and concise than oral reports. Here in this exhibit, we see the range of variation of a standard. So the standard may be overachieved or underachieved, but there is a tolerance level upon which we don't take any action. So if the limit or the variation is within the acceptable upper limit or lower limit, then we assume that the standard is achieved and we don't take any action. Comparing performance to goals. Here we see an example of determining significant variation. There is a company, maybe Green Earth Gardening Supply, June sales are given here. It is selling some products, vegetable plants, perennial flowers, annual flowers, herbs, flowering bulbs, etc. And then we have standards for each product and the actual performance or actual sales. And then the last column tells whether it was overachieved or underachieved. We can see that the figures in the last column with parentheses are negative numbers and those without parentheses are positive numbers. It is actually actual minus standard. So the first, for example, vegetable plants, 913 minus 1075, we have negative 162, and so on and so forth. We can see that although the overachievement is there, but some are underachieved and some are overachieved. In this case, for example, the first vegetable plant is underachieved. 162 difference is coming. And similarly, if you see the last one, heirloom seeds, the positive difference is coming. Both positive difference and negative difference must be seen critically and analyzed. Also, we can see here in the flowering bulbs as well, the difference is large. So all these differences should be seen and analyzed, that why overachieved or why underachieved. If overachieved, then we might have to revise our standards on the same way to upward. If it is underachieved, we have to see the reasons why we are not able to sell these heirloom seeds, etc. Now we said that after the measurement we compare and then we correct the performance. The performance can be corrected either through immediate corrective action or by basic correction action. Immediate corrective action is by direction, and right away it is given order to correct it or given suggestion to correct the performance, whereas the basic correction action involves more thorough understanding of the problem and then giving the reason how and why the performance was not achieved, and then giving the different alternatives to correct the performance. Immediate corrective action, as an example, we can see of a GPS system. When we are driving a car and take a wrong turn, then the GPS start giving us directions that to make a U-turn or recalculate the route, etc., etc. So it's an immediate corrective action is there. Revising standards. If performance consistently exceeds the goal, then the goal may need to be raised. So if we are overachieving, then the goal must be raised, the bar must be raised. But on the other hand, if the goal is underachieved, then one has to see the reason, because generally when the goal is underachieved, there is human tendency to blame the goal rather than their own performance. So one has to be looking at the problem, why the goal was not underachieved, etc. Revising the goal downward is usually not recommended. Discuss the types of control organizations and managers use. Now here in this exhibit, we see that, let's say this is an organization here, and the processes or the operations are going on. Operations are going on. It has an input and then it has some output. So in the input we can put some controls, and that is called feed-forward control. This feed-forward control anticipates the problems and try to correct it from the very beginning. Concurrent control is correcting the problem as they happen, and then when the output is there, then of course we cannot do anything, but there is a feedback control which correct problem after they occur, and that feedback goes to either to input or to the operations so that the performance is achieved. The required performance is achieved. As an example of input control, you people come from, you can think about that our university is providing education and you are our product. So you are our output. When you will graduate, you will be a graduate that will be working as engineers there. So this is an output there. The input is, of course, when you came as from the high school, that was the input. Now, what we do is, as a feed-forward control, is that first of all, we try to select the best students in engineering. Then there is a foundation program that helps to bring you to the level. In the foundation program, you learn English, you have math subjects you learn. So this is, you are trying to control from the very beginning. Then when you join the engineering program, there is concurrent control there. You are learning many different courses, and in these courses you are getting assignments, quizzes. All this concurrent control is going on so that you have the required output, the required outcomes, which we may say that you have the ability to solve engineering problems, the ability to apply math, science, and engineering in the problems. You have ability to communicate effectively, etc. These different outcomes, ability to work in multidisciplinary teams, etc. All these things, all these outcomes are our output in you as a graduate. Now the feedback will come from the industry. We have industrial partners, we have industrial board in which we meet with them every 6 months or so, and we get their feedback as well. So this feedback comes to us, and eventually we may have to change few things. The feedback may be positive, it may be negative. The negative feedback may be coming like that the students have, for example, communication problem. They cannot express themselves or cannot really write a good report, etc. Then we have to do something, and we have done that. So this is kind of a control process in our organization here. So let's see in the control techniques which are used in different organizations. There's a preliminary control or feed-forward control. We can have, there are three things which goes as a preliminary in any as an input. These are human resources, okay. Resources, and the material goes in and the capital goes in. So these are the three things: human resources, materials, and capital, which goes as an input to any organization, and we will see that how to control that. The concurrent control is by directions. And then we have the feedback control, which is when the output is there. And the output can be seen in many different ways. You can see how the company has or the organization has performed financially. So there are financial statement analysis. There are standard cost analysis, budget analysis are also there, quality control procedures are there, and employee performance evaluation is there. So there are different feedback methods, feedback control measures can be done once the output is available to us. Managers may use any of the many control techniques available to take corrective action. Now we are going to discuss these control techniques in bit detail. As said earlier, there are three things which goes as an input. One is human resources, second is materials, and third is capital. So human resources, the selection of candidates for different positions must be recruited from inside or outside the organization. The organization function determines the tasks that the job holders need to perform and the skills required to perform this task. We have discussed the organizing function, but we didn't discuss much on human resource management. But staffing is part of organizational organizing. So in the organizing function, the staffing is one of the important tasks. One thing I would like to say over here, that these functions, planning, organizing, leading, controlling, all these functions are not mutually exclusive. They are overlapping functions. For example, we discuss human resource management in organizing. We discuss organizational structures, we discuss the job description and so on. There, we also are discussing human resources here as a control measure, and we may also discuss this in leading function as well, that the leaders are there to select the right people and guide them. So we can see that all these different functions are not mutually exclusive, but they are overlapping functions. So skills and personal characteristics must be matched to the job requirements, and the individual selected must also be further trained on the job requirement. This is very important. This is a kind of a control measure, that first you select the right people who have the right skills and personal characteristics, and also then train them for the job. Preliminary control is achieved through rules and procedures that govern the selection, placement, and training of personnel. So there are rules and procedures that govern the selection and placement and training of personnel. The second thing which goes as an input is materials. Raw material is converted into finished products, and that must conform to standards of quality and must be adequate to satisfy the demand. Now, raw material may be coming in bulk, in large quantities, so statistical sampling techniques can be used to control the quality of materials. Again, the rules and procedures are there to help, and there may be policies as well of selection, how the material will be selected. The acceptance or rejection of material should be part of the written company policies and procedures. An example of a policy could be that accept the lot if sample defectives are less than 3% and reject it if more than 5%. The policy may also say if sample defectives are between 3% and 5%, inspect another sample. The third thing which goes as an input to any organization is capital. The capital is required to purchase resources in order to expand the firm's productive capacity or replace the old equipment. Lenders and equity holders provide capital to businesses for their daily and long-term needs. Capital acquisition is controlled by the potential profitability of the organization and collateral such as assets. So if the capital is borrowed, of course, it has to be borrowed against collateral such as asset, and also the lenders also see that there is a potential profitability, and then they provide the capital. Now, to control the capital that it is used properly, capital budgeting is used. Capital budget is the means to detail the alternative uses and sources of funds. The managerial decisions that involve the commitment of present funds in exchange for future funds are called investments. So when the capitals are required for future extension, for starting new projects, the investment should be properly handled and used for doing the right projects. And a variety of techniques exist to evaluate alternative investments. We have learned these different techniques of evaluating investments. Some of them are mentioned here. Payback method. This method calculates the number of years needed for the proposed capital acquisition to repay its original cost out of future cash earnings. Return on investment is another way to evaluate the investment, which measures the amount of return on investment relative to the investment cost. For example, you invested in, let's say, you bought 1,000 reals of share of some company. After 1 year, they become 1,200, and you sold them. Then 1,200 minus 1,000 is 200. 200 divided by the initial investment cost, which was 1,000. Then the rate of investment, return on investment, is 20%. The calculated ROI is then compared to some standard of minimum acceptability, and the decision to accept or reject would depend on the comparison. Another method could be profitability index. It is defined by the ratio of present value of all future benefits, present value of all net future benefits, we can say, divided by the initial investment. These are the three methods here only mentioned, but we have different ways. We can have discounted payback method, we can have benefit to cost ratio, net present value, etc. as well. Now, having discussed the input, the control measures which are done in the input, and these inputs were, we talked about human resources, we talked about material and material inspection, human resource management, material inspection, and capital budgeting. Now, when the operation is going on, or the processes are going on in an organization, then we have the control which we carry out is called concurrent control. Control that takes place while a work activity is in progress, and concurrent control is done by directions. Usually the supervisors are there to take care of that. They observe and they take the corrective actions when the progress is not up to that standard or the quality is not maintained, etc. Concurrent control is done. Now, when the output is there, then there is a feedback control which takes place after a work activity is done. Feedback control focuses on historical outcomes as the basis for correcting future actions. So now the output is there, we can't do anything, but for future actions that the output the next time or next year, the outcome should be achieve the goals should be achieved, we have to take the corrective actions. The feedback control method can be used today in business. For example, financial statement analysis are there, budget analysis are there, standard cost analysis are there, quality control, employee performance evaluation, and corrective action is basically taken to improve inputs and operation based on the results.